There's a specific kind of rage that bubbles up when someone treats your property like their own personal pantry. It's not just about the money, it's about the audacity. My neighbor thought he was a ghost, slipping into my yard to bleed my supplies dry while I worked to keep my life together. He thought he was clever. He thought I was blind. But by the time he realized I'd turned his greed into his own mechanical nightmare, it was already too late. He didn't just lose his car, he lost his freedom. If you've ever had a neighbor from hell who thought they were above the law, you're going to want to hear every second of this. We've all felt that spark of needing to set things right. Hit that subscribe button and like this video if you believe in poetic justice. Today, we're diving into a story where the revenge wasn't just served cold, it was bottled. You know that feeling when you're sure something is wrong, but you try to convince yourself you're just losing your mind? That was me for 3 months. I live in a modest house with a decent-sized yard. I take pride in it. Every Saturday morning, like clockwork, I head out to the shed, grab my 5-gallon gas can, and prep the mower. My mower is a small, reliable little beast with a 1-quart tank. Simple math tells you that a 5-gallon should last me forever. I should be able to mow the lawn 20 times before I even need to think about hitting the gas station. But suddenly, the math stopped making sense. I'd go to the shed, lift the plastic handle, and my heart would sink. It was light, way too light. I'd unscrew the cap, peer into the dark plastic void, and see maybe an inch of fuel sloshing around at the bottom. I'd stand there, scratching my head, thinking, did I leave the cap loose? Is it evaporating? Am I going crazy? I started keeping a mental log. Fill up on Sunday. Mow on Saturday. By next Saturday, 3 gallons were gone. I don't have a leak. My garage floor is bone dry. My mower isn't a gas-guzzling monster. Someone was coming onto my property, stepping over the invisible line of privacy, and helping themselves to my hard-earned money. It's a violation that gets under your skin. Your home is supposed to be your sanctuary. The idea of a stranger, or worse, a neighbor, creeping around my backyard while I'm at work or sleeping made my skin crawl. It wasn't about the $20 in gas. It was the disrespect, the feeling that I was being watched, timed, and harvested. I had a prime suspect, Greg. Greg lived 2 houses down. He was the kind of guy who always had a junker car up on blocks, but never seemed to have a job. He was loud, he was rude, and he had this squinty, predatory way of looking at people's garages. I'd catch him watching me from his porch, eyes tracking my movements like a hawk watching a field mouse. But I couldn't prove it. This was back before every house had a Ring doorbell or 4K wireless cameras. If you wanted surveillance, you had to get creative. I decided I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. I grabbed my old laptop, a clunky thing that weighed 10 pounds, and spent an afternoon configuring a cheap USB webcam. I taped it to the inside of my back window, obscured by the blinds, and loaded up some primitive motion detection software. The very next day, I made a show of leaving. I jingled my keys, tossed my bag in the car, and pulled out of the driveway at 8:05 a.m. I didn't even make it to the end of the block before my phone buzzed. I pulled over, opened a remote viewer, and there he was. Greg. He didn't even look around. He didn't look guilty. He walked into my backyard with the casual confidence of a man walking into his own kitchen. He picked up my gas can, carried it back to his fence, and vanished. 5 minutes later, he walked back, set the empty can exactly where he found it, and strolled away. The audacity left me shaking. He wasn't even waiting for nightfall. He was doing this in broad daylight, 5 minutes after my tires left the pavement. He had timed my life. He had turned my routine into his utility. That night, I sat in the dark, staring at that gas can. I could have called the cops, sure. But for what? A petty theft charge? Don't do it again? Talk from an officer? No. Greg had been fueling his life with my effort. It was time for him to pay a different kind of price. The plan formed with a strange, dark clarity. I knew Greg was lazy. I knew he was cheap. And I knew he wouldn't check the quality of what he was stealing as long as it smelled like what he wanted. The next week was, let's call it a hydration phase. Every time I had to go to the bathroom, I didn't head for the toilet. I headed for the backyard shed. It sounds gross, I know, but every time I added to that gas can, I felt a little bit of that powerlessness wash away. I left about half a gallon of actual gasoline in the bottom, just enough to ensure that the pungent chemical odor would overwhelm any other scent. The rest? Pure, concentrated biological revenge. By Friday, that 5-gallon can was heavy again. It looked full. It smelled like a gas station, but it was a chemical disaster waiting to happen. On Saturday morning, I staged the performance of a lifetime. I went out to the driveway. I popped the hood of my car. I checked the oil. I made sure to look at Greg's house, knowing he was watching through his grease-stained curtains. I started packing bags into my trunk. I acted like a man heading out for a long weekend trip, someone who wouldn't be back to check his shed for days. I waved at a neighbor, yelled, "See you Monday," to the empty air, and drove off. I didn't go far. I circled the block, parked 3 streets over, and walked back through the woods to a spot where I could see my backyard and Greg's driveway. I waited. It took exactly 10 minutes. Greg appeared like a vulture. He practically sprinted to my patio, grabbed the heavy can with a grin on his face, and lugged it back to his property. I watched from the brush as he unscrewed the cap of his lawnmower and poured in a healthy dose of the special blend. Then, he walked over to his beat-up old sedan, the one he'd been trying to get running for weeks, and emptied the rest of the 5 gallons straight into the tank. He was whistling. He actually had the nerve to whistle while he sabotaged his own life. I walked back to my car, drove home, and pulled into my driveway about an hour later. I pretended my car was acting up, popping the hood and sighing loudly for the neighborhood to hear. Then, the show started. In a yard 2 houses down, Greg was trying to start his mower. Pull, sputter, pull, sputter. He was yanking that starter rope so hard I thought his shoulder was going to pop out of the socket. His face was turning a shade of purple I didn't know humans could achieve. He was screaming at the machine, cursing it, kicking the deck. He had no idea that he had just filled his carburetor with something that was never meant to combust. Eventually, he gave up on the mower with a final, violent kick and stomped over to his car. He slammed the door, turned the key, and miraculously, the engine turned over. He'd left just enough real gas in the lines to get the car moving. He backed out of the driveway, giving me a smug, superior look as he passed. I just waved. A friendly, have a nice trip kind of wave. He made it exactly 2 blocks. I stood in my driveway and listened. The sound of a car engine dying due to improper fuel is a very specific, pathetic sound. It's a series of coughs, a rhythmic metal-on-metal groan, and then silence. I walked down the street a few minutes later, just a neighbor concerned about a broken-down car. There was Greg, standing over his open hood, the smell of burnt sugar and something much worse wafting from the engine. The car was toast. The fuel injectors, the lines, the tank, it was all contaminated. To fix it, he'd have to spend 10 times what that gas was worth. But I wasn't done. The gas was just the appetizer. See, once I started looking into Greg, I realized he wasn't just a thief, he was a runner. I'd done a little digging on public record sites and found out Greg had several outstanding warrants for his arrest, mostly unpaid fines and failure to appear for previous petty thefts. I knew he'd never turn himself in, and I knew the cops wouldn't go hunting for a small fry like him unless he fell into their laps. So, I called the local sheriff's department. I told them I was interested in their citizen ride-along program. I filled out the paperwork, but I did it with a twist. I recommended a candidate for a home visit check-in as part of a community outreach initiative. I gave him Greg's name. I gave him his address. I told him he was a vulnerable citizen who might need some official guidance. 2 days later, while Greg was sitting on his porch staring at his dead car and his broken mower, 2 squad cars pulled up. They weren't there for a friendly chat. They ran his ID, the warrants popped up, and Greg was led away in handcuffs in front of the entire neighborhood. As they put him in the back of the cruiser, he looked at me. I was standing on my lawn, holding my 5-gallon gas can. I unscrewed the cap, tipped it over, and poured the last few drops of fuel into the grass while looking him dead in the eye. He knew. And the best part, he couldn't say a word. What was he going to do? Tell the cops I poisoned the gas he stole from me? In the end, Greg learned a very expensive, very humiliating lesson. Fuel isn't free, and the person you're stealing from might just be the one who ends your streak. Sometimes, justice isn't found in a courtroom. It's found in a gas can. That's one way to flush a problem neighbor away. What's the most creative way you've ever handled someone who wouldn't stop taking what wasn't theirs? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss a story of sweet, sweet vindication. Thanks for watching.